Hello, my name is Gareth. You're watching the Hub Online Network, and today we have Barbara Roden in the house. We're going to be talking about COVID, things going on in Ashcroft and Cache Creek, the Hub, and I believe a little bit about the pool, but we'll see how far we get with that. So without further ado, let's get All right, so Barbara, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you today, Gareth?
I'm tired, but I'm getting there. For people at home that don't know, I am going through my second round of cancer, but I'm just plugging away. So here I am.
Good. Good to have you here.
All right, so let's get. Well, you know what? I'm not the only one going through some kind of not health crisis, but health issue. I understand you got something going on with your gallbladder.
Gallbladder. You know, it's been with me for 57 years, but next Friday we're scheduled to say goodbye to each other.
Well, some things just can't last forever, can it?
No, I guess not, and my gallbladder is one of those things, apparently.
Do you get any of the you're our mayor. Who's going to lead us if you are out of commission for any length of time?
Well, you know, Ashcroft was incorporated in 1952. It plugged along for a long time without me, and I'm sure it'll do just fine. It's a day surgery. I guess we've come a long way in these things, which is really amazing. I mean, we do things with medicine now as day surgery that 50 or 60 years ago would have been unheard of. And if you did have it done, you'd be in hospital for weeks on end. So it really is miraculous in some ways. So it's supposed to be a day surgery. I go in next Friday. I come home next Friday, and they say no heavy lifting. I'm waiting to hear from Royal Inland just sort of what that recovery period looks like, but talking to other people who've gone through it, and a surprising number of people have had their gallbladder out. You find these things when it's your turn. Apparently it's you know, just it's common sense. It's so many people after surgery, they try and push themselves too far. I'm feeling fine, I can do this, you know, and no, just take it easy, because that's going to do you better in the long run than trying to be Superwoman. So I do not plan on being Superwoman.
Does that not affect your bodybuilding career?
Yeah, you know, the triathlon training is really going to go off the rails with this one, but you know, we'll figure out a way around it.
Well, to move on to actual, not that your gallbladder being out is actual news. In other if you were the president or the prime minister, you know, you would be getting a lot of press about this.
It would have to be a really slow news day for the mayor of Ashcroft's gallbladder to be a news story. Let's just put it that way.
A friend of the Vancouver Sun.
No, it's not going to be there.
So let's get into some actual stuff right now. Hang on, before we talk about this. So you came in today and you were listening to the Bonnie Henry update on COVID.
Yes.
And I have a question, since you're a journalist as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you listen to those types of things, do you prefer it? Do you feel like you get more answers from what they say, or more answers from the questions that are posed to them by other people?
I really enjoyed the questions because that's where you really get a sense of what people are thinking about, what they're concerned about, what they're worried about, because, you know, journalists aren't making these questions up out of necessarily just their own heads. They're listening to other people. They're getting people coming to them and saying, hey, you know, you can talk to Bonnie Henry, ask her about this. They're getting the emails, they're getting the feedback on the stories they write. So I really find that helpful to hear the questions, because it's really indicative of what a lot of people are, what's top of their mind. And what's top of people's mind isn't necessarily what the politicians or the talking heads think is top of their mind.
Right. Okay. Well, good to know. So that being said, Barbara brought in a list of interior health COVID-19 vaccinations. So this is the schedule. I don't have anything to put up on the screen for this because this was just brought in. But you can call 1-877-740-7747 to register and book a vaccine. And if you were born before 1931, how many people these days are born before 1931?
Well, that's people 90 and older. And just with that number, it is available on the Interior Health website. It's a public number. Everyone can see it. But they are really saying to people, please look to see when you are eligible to start phoning about a vaccine. And please don't phone before that time, because they're anticipating a huge number of calls.
Right.
And this is not the number to call if you have questions, or if you have, you know, you're trying to jump the queue. They're very, you know,
1-877-740-7747.
they've set it out if you were born in or before 1931, you can start to call this number on March 8th, which is Monday, coming up. And then the week after, anyone born in 1936 or before, and then the week after that, anyone born in 1941 or before. And they're saying that if you miss your week, once you are eligible, like once your year of birth has been called, you can call any time to book a vaccination.
Right.
You can't book before you're eligible, but once you're eligible, you can call any time. So if you're unavailable that week, or you just can't make it, or you forgot to call, you haven't missed your spot.
If, now this is just something that I heard, this is not a hard note, but if you are someone, say like myself, who has cancers and has diabetes or some sort of serious health issue, are you still supposed to be getting your vaccine at this point? Or is that something that you're privy to?
I haven't heard about that. I suspect if you look on the Interior Health website about COVID-19, it will tell you if you have underlying conditions, if you have cancer, if you have diabetes, if you're obese, if you have any kind of underlying, I think COPD is another one, you can always call your healthcare provider, or there is a COVID-19 helpline number that's available to answer your questions about COVID. So that would be a place to turn to say, okay, my age group isn't going to be available for a couple of months, but I have whatever.
Yeah.
And then that way you'll be able to get the clarity.
Okay.
Yep.
So beyond that, so the call center number above is open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week. Only call when or after you are eligible. A live agent will assist you with your booking and provide an appointment date, time, and location. A family member or support individual may also call to book an appointment on behalf of an eligible person. So, when you are eligible to call, please have the following information ready when you call. Legal name, date of birth, postal code, personal health number from the back of your BC's driver's license, BC Services card, or BC Care card, and your current contact information, including an email address. You or a family member checks regularly. Call centers will never ask people for financial information, including credit card details. And once your registration is booked, you will receive a confirmation email.
Now, I did ask today, we were on a conference call, there's a vaccine roundtable for all the Interior Health mayors every Thursday now, and I did ask about emails because a lot of people, especially older folks, might not have an email, and particularly if you're in a rural area that's internet challenged. And they are looking at other ways to get that information out. One possibility is if you don't have email yourself, but you have a son or daughter, or someone who can take it for you that with your confirmation information, or there's good old pen and paper. Have a pen and paper with you and they will tell you over the phone, all right, you're confirmed, this is where your vaccine is taking place and this is when, and you can just write it down.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We had vaccinations in the hub today, and they were for the Cooksbury First Nations group, and they were in here from like 9 o'clock until noon or 1, so that was pretty awesome. I didn't get a chance to talk to anybody from there, but I saw it happening, so congratulations, guys. And yeah, so that's it that I have for vaccinations.
That's all I've got right now.
Sorry, you were saying that there's the possibility of where the vaccinations might be happening in town?
Interior Health has been contacting lots of communities about holding clinics in facilities that are owned by municipalities, and so we have discussed with them Drylands Arena.
Okay.
The ice is out now. It came out last Sunday, so hockey's done for the year, so don't worry, you don't need to bring your ice skates if that's where it's happening.
Wouldn't that be fun, though?
Well, just add that extra layer of excitement to the whole thing. Yeah, I would not want to be doing it on skates. But when you phone up to make your registration, depending on where you live, they will tell you where your vaccination clinic is.
Okay, sounds good. Now, I have some things. Oh, you know what? Before we get to that, we are a very busy area.
Yes.
Now, typically, the way I always thought it would be was, when I started covering councils and board meetings and stuff, was most meetings would be pretty typical, pretty dry. This is, sort of what's going on, etc. However, both the Cache Creek Council and the SD74 Board of Trustees are making life very interesting for myself, and I'm sure yourself as you write about it quite a bit. So, do you have any insights, thoughts? So to preface this, okay, so what's going on with School District 74 is they are in the midst of the disposal process of the Ashcroft Elementary School, which is now referred to as the Ashcroft Hub, which is the building
Which is where we're sitting right now.
Which is where we're at right now. On Tuesday, they had the meeting where I thought that it was going to be a full-on just vote, this is what we're going to do, done. And it kind of was, kind of wasn't. Larry Casper, one of the trustees, put forward a motion to sell the building to the hub for a nominal fee. Now, nominal is the term here. Trustee Carmen Ranta added an amendment to that. What's your understanding of the amendment? And I want to see if it's the same as mine. I don't want to sound silly first.
The amendment, she referenced the sale of the Coppervale School, which was down on the end of Railway Avenue, and it was, I wasn't living here at the time that it closed down. It stood empty for a time, and then it was, the property was disposed of. The school was closed, and it was torn down. Subsequently, the Villa Frontera development went in on that property, and what Trustee Ranta seemed to be referencing was the fact that at some point after it left the possession of the school district, it was developed for townhomes, so it was developed commercially. So presumably someone along the line made money out of that. So she I think is concerned that if, for example, they transfer it to the Hub Society for a nominal fee, and then the Hub Society takes full control and ownership of this building and property, what happens down the road if they sell it? Because it would be their property to dispose of as they saw fit if they wanted to. And I think she wants to explore ways to have some mechanism put in place whereby if the Hub Society sold it, any profits or money made on it or some portion thereof would go back to the school district.
My understanding is, and I'm going to get to your comment here in a second, Steve, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong about this. And the comment's directed towards you, so I'm going to read it here in a second.
Okay.
However, my understanding is that the school in Spence's Bridge, who was sold to the community group there, has a similar clause.
I don't know.
So Stephen, if you can correct me on that, that would be great. And just to go back to our previous conversation here, because I have a comment from Steve. Stephen says, how about the area directors being on the roundtable call? Barbara makes a great effort to share information, but it is not up to her to reach the rural areas outside municipal boundaries. So that's the comment from Steve.
Okay.
I'm sure that there are plenty of people that are a part of that group and roundtable discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody should be included in that and given their proper due. So good point. But yeah, please correct me if I'm wrong about the school and the school district in Spence's Bridge. So that was my understanding of Carmen's thing as well. So I'm just making sure that we're on the same page for that.
Yep. Now this is going to be the subject of discussion at their next meeting, which I believe is scheduled for April 6th.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's also, the other thing that's going to be discussed is the term nominal fee, because there was some confusion as to what nominal fee means, which, looking it up on the internet, just says selling anything for less than what it's typically worth. So if it's worth $10 and you sell it for $9, I suppose that's still technically a nominal fee, or if it's greatly reduced, I'm not sure what that scale looks like. The other thing that happened was, the motion didn't go through swiftly. It was kind of like a 3-2 to 1 vote. So there's 6 people that can vote. 3 of them voted in favor of Larry's motion, which was to sell the building to the hub for a nominal fee. 2 people voted against it, and 1 person abstained.
Right.
which doesn't feel like it's a typical thing. What does abstaining mean in this particular situation?
I actually had to look it up because local governments typically do not have the ability for anyone to abstain. I mean, if you're the mayor and you call a vote and you say all those in favor and I don't put my hand up,
Sure.
and then you say all those opposed and I still don't put my hand up, I'm taken to have voted in favor, even though I didn't put my hand up.
Really?
Yep. So if there were, none of us on council can abstain. We cannot say, I am not voting on this, and I do not want my vote recorded. Your vote, you will be recorded as having voted, even if you didn't do anything, because if you don't put up your hand to say no, you're assumed to say yes. And that's actually a legal principle, quitac consentire, which is silence gives assent. If you stay silent, you are agreeing with the motion. And that's a legal principle. Now, I did look it up in the School District 74 procedural bylaw. They actually do give their trustees, the Board of Education trustees, you can abstain. You can say, I am abstaining from this vote. I don't think you even have to give a reason. And that your vote is not counted either way. So there were 6 people around the table who could vote. One of them abstained, so that left 5 people whose votes were actually counted and recorded.
Interesting.
Yes.
So Stephen says that the SBID has a 10-year agreement with the school district, which expired a few years ago, at which time the SBID became the keepers of the property with no involvement with SD74. If this is 100% ownership and or has conditions, I am not sure of that scope. Awesome. Thank you very much for writing that in, Stephen. I appreciate you joining in the conversation. So that was the way that vote went. I thought it was interesting. I've never seen that happen before. So,
and there was always going to be a lot of discussion. I mean, all the, what was it, 145, 148 survey responses, the synopses of 3 separate meetings with different organizations, including the Village of Ashcroft, and then I think another 45 actual letters. And all of those were there in the agenda. So I think it was 60 or 70 pages.
Yeah.
And so given that scope of the feedback and the sheer amount of feedback that they received, I figured it was going to be the subject of a fairly robust discussion, and that proved to be the case.
okay, so I got a question for you. Because this is, if I was in politics, which I'm not, this might be one way that I look at it. And again, for people at home, I try not to put my self-involvement in any of this stuff. But I've said this a couple of times. So if I were in council and there was a big vote of some kind, okay, and we say we want public input, how many people live in Ashcroft?
Just under 1,600.
Okay, so well, let's just say 1,600 even, because this is just a hypothetical. So there were 148 letters that came in support, in not all support of the hub, but mostly support of the hub. If you take 148 letters, and there's just in Ashcroft, there's 1,600 people, is that enough to justify, like if now, what's that, 1,450 people didn't say anything? Is that enough to make a decision on? Because you're assuming if you're abstaining by not saying anything, that is a positive.
Yeah, I mean, if
Does that make sense?
generally if there's a hot button topic,
Yeah.
People who feel passionate about it on either side,
Yeah.
either they're passionately for it, whatever it is, or they're passionately against it, those people will write in to whoever it is because they want to make their voice known. And you will get people who are, you know, sort of not lukewarm, that's not the right word, but people who aren't passionate about it but think it's a good thing or sometimes a bad thing. So once you've accounted for the people who are really passionately for it and passionately against it, the assumption would be that if people haven't written in, they're okay with it.
Right.
If they weren't okay with it, you would have heard from them. So that's generally the guiding principle, if there is one, of, you know, what kind of reaction are we getting? Now, I don't think school boards, I don't know if they can do this. Local governments, of course, everyone knows about going to a referendum. If you're the Kamloops was going to go to a referendum for their performing arts center, and then that got derailed because of COVID. So everyone knows about referendums. You go, it's like voting. You go and you're presented with a ballot that says, yes, I approve of this, or no, I don't. And you put your X and you drop your thing in the box. Before you do that, there's also called the alternative approval process, AAP, and that is where it's basically a negative billing. It's like negative billing. You get something and it says, this is going to go through unless 10% of the registered voters return this piece of paper, they sign this piece of paper and return it. If you sign this piece of paper and return it, you don't want what's being proposed.
Gotcha.
And if 10% of the registered voters do that, then it either gets defeated, and then you either have to go to referendum or you just drop it. It's because they're assuming that if you really don't want it, you will fill out that piece of paper and you will drop it off. If you're okay with it, you're going to go, yeah, no, I'm fine with that.
I always sort of took it as, there's 1,450 people that just don't care enough to say something. But I mean, that makes more sense than my thought process.
No, I mean, there are a lot of people who probably, really, they like the hub, they enjoy it, or their kids come here and do things, or they came and saw a play here, they came and saw a concert, but it's just not something that would make them put pen to paper.
Right.
And I don't fault anyone for that. I mean, it's been a crazy year for everyone, and it's easy to forget these things. But as I said, if you really feel passionate about something, you'll generally let someone know, either way.
So at this moment in time, the motion has been put forward and voted on and passed for the school district to sell the hub, or to sell the building to the hub for a nominal fee, and we're waiting until next month to know what a nominal fee means to them, and to know if Carmen's amendment is...
Well, the amendment is part of the motion. It became part of the motion.
The information from the amendment is handed in.
Yep, to see what staff come back with.
So.
I mean, they always said it was going to be a long process. I mean, no matter what happened, because just the process itself is a very technical one. There's obviously a lot to consider. So, it's going to be a long road, whatever happens. And they've been very clear about that from the beginning. This was not going to be over in 2 or 3 months.
Right. And now, so moving on from that, because that was sort of the big topic at the school board meeting. The next one is Cache Creek Council and what's going on there, and that is still revolving around the pool. Now, you put out an article from the Ashcroft Cache Creek Journal, and you got how many comments on that one?
I socialed it out. That was on Cache Creek Community Watch. People, sometimes stories take on a life of their own, and it's always interesting to me because I never know which stories that I write are going to generate a lot of interest, and sometimes stories that I don't think, it's not that I don't think they're interesting. If I didn't think they were interesting, I wouldn't write them, but stories that I don't think are going to get much in the way of feedback, suddenly it explodes with people commenting on it. And often, and I really like this, often they're really just nice feel-good stories. That I think, people will find this amusing or enjoyable. It'll put a smile on their face, and that's it. And then suddenly the comments just explode, and people are going, and it reminds them of something, or they're letting other people know about it, which I think is really nice. And so when that happens to one of those stories, I'm always like, wow, that's nice.
Did you read all the comments from that particular?
No, I like Facebook for some things. In other ways, I'm not such a fan. So I'm kind of ambivalent towards Facebook. So I try not, and because I have to use it for work, it's a work tool, I try not to spend an awful lot of time on it when I'm not working, just because otherwise that's too much like work.
Well, when we were at the Cache Creek meeting the other day, we were inundated with questions as we were sitting there. We got so many questions and comments that we couldn't keep up with where we were on the list of questions. I was trying to read them and more comments kept coming in and it just kept jittering on the comment list. So I was trying to ask all the questions. I did end up asking all the questions in our recap yesterday. So if you haven't checked that out about the Cache Creek Council recap, we put that up yesterday. Um, but there's so many people very passionate about the pool, and people putting out a lot of different perspectives and things that they're willing to do to keep the pool and whatnot. Do you have any? How easy is it? So put on your mayor hat here for a second. How easy is it to actually get a grant? Everybody says there's
Ooh,
a million grants out there. Why don't we just
grants.
get a grant?
Wow, there are a number of grants out there. They often have very narrow criteria, so you really have to make sure that your project, whatever it is, ticks all of the boxes, depending on the grant and what it's for. If it's kind of paradoxically, if a grant is for something that doesn't come up for grants very often, you're going to be inundated with grant applications because people are jumping on it. Wow, these opportunities don't come along very often. And so it's going to be vastly oversubscribed. Right. You're going to have way more people applying for funding than the fund has money. So the people on the other end who are looking at all these grant applications, and every single one of them is probably a great application and it's a wonderful project and it would be of huge benefit to the community, but they have to say no to some of them because they just don't have enough dollars to go around. So applying for grants is great. It can be a long time before they're announced. So if you're looking for something really short term, they're maybe not the best thing to rely on. And there is absolutely no guarantee that you're going to get it.
So that being said, my understanding of so let's use an Ashcroft situation. You guys recently upgraded your hot tub or redid your hot tub.
We're getting a new hot tub.
Right. And you got a grant for at least part of it. And this is, I think this was either the grant that we got covered 80% of the funds. So before you apply for the grant for the Procure project, you have to know what the cost is going to be. And they came back and said, all right, we'll cover 80% of what the projected cost is. But that was the third time we'd applied for a grant. This was the third different grant we'd applied for the hot tub. The first two, they came back and said no. Is having an 80% coverage or you still having to pay a portion a typical thing for a grant to do?
There's no typical grants. Some of them are 100%. I mean, at the same time, we got 80% grant funding for the hot tub, so it covered 80% of, I think, $172,000 was what we projected it would cost. So they said, we'll give you 80% of that. You have to cover the other 20%. Yep. The same day we got that funding, we'd also applied for funding to completely replace lift station number 1, I believe, over in North Ashcroft for the sewage treatment plant, and we got a 100% grant for $1.3 million.
Okay.
For that one. So they covered 100% of the $1.3 million project and 80% of the $175,000 project.
And the 100% coverage isn't like some mythical thing, like it's just sort of luck of the draw. They're all, you could get 100% or you could get 80.
Depends on the grant criteria. In advance, in advance whether the grant you're applying for is going to cover 100%, 80%, 50%. Do you have to put in matching funds? Can they take donations in kind? Yep, all of that is in the grant rules, if you will. So up front what you're applying for and if you're successful, this is what we'll get. So if you know up front that you're applying for a grant that's only going to cover 80%, that's where you have to look and say, all right, well, the other 20% is going to be this much money. Do we have that? Or can we get it?
So a little bit of breaking news, at least for myself anyway. So I've been making some phone calls about the pool and, sort of what steps are typically taken and that kind of stuff. And one of the questions that has been coming up over and over and over again was the COVID restructure grant.
The COVID Safe Restart.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Now, the one in Cache Creek, they got just over, to my understanding, $450,000.
I think it was 461.
Yeah. And so, but no one seemed to know what that money could be officially used for. The question was, could it be used for the pool? So I put a phone call into the ministry that gave the grant to the municipality, and I said, this is the situation, can it be used? I spoke with Jennifer. Jennifer said unequivocally, yes.
Okay.
So that is, if you didn't know that, we made the call, we got the confirmation. So thank you, Jennifer. She also gave me her number, so if I have any more questions, I can just call her again. But so we'll see what happens with that.
Yep.
Moving forward.
Yep.
Now that being said, another interesting, probably a more interesting thing, if I had to pick one, that came up at the council meeting the other day, and I might be misunderstanding this. Barbara, I believe, I fully believe, knows more than I do.
I don't know.
So, another thing that came out was a couple of old grants that sort of hit their term,
Mm-hmm.
and are now being asked to either take an extension or pay back any money that wasn't spent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the previous council, it seems like, took that money in 2016, 2017, two different grants, two different times, and they put that money into general revenue. So typically you would think that if they're taking $32,000 for a specific goal or project, that they would take that money and put it aside and say, this is our project money for that $32,000. But they didn't do that, and it seems as though, this is where I want you to clarify, it seems as though that money was spent.
I don't know. I'm not privy to that. I mean, they have with the one grant anyway, for I believe economic development, they've decided they voted to go ahead with what it was originally applied for, which I think is a great step.
Totally.
So, but I can't because I don't know.
So the next one that came up was 150,000, and the CFO mentioned that they might be running a deficit.
Yeah, I can't comment.
That's
I mean,
fair, okay.
and the thing with the EMBC funding, I don't know the particulars of this particular one, but I know a big bone of contention for a lot of rural communities especially, and now we get back to that, percentages.
Mm-hmm.
Some Emergency Management BC, for those who don't speak acronym, because it's just really something that people, I shouldn't do, but I do. If you have, heaven forbid, an emergency or a disaster in your community, you can apply for Emergency Management BC funding.
Okay.
Now, while the emergency is actually happening, like it's happening right now, they will fund 100% of eligible expenses to deal with it right now while it's happening. Then you get into the post phase where now it's the cleanup time.
Sure.
You look at the damage, what's been done, what have we lost, what needs to be repaired, rebuilt, fixed, whatever. They will pay 80% of eligible costs.
Okay.
And there is a long list of things that are not eligible. So for example, if you live in a community and it floods and you lose your retaining wall in your backyard, that's not covered.
Right.
And so the sticking point for a lot of small communities particularly is the cleanup bill for your eligible expenses can be quite hefty after a natural disaster. And EMBC pays 80%, which is wonderful, don't get me wrong. But if you're looking at a cleanup bill of $500,000,
Yep.
well, 20% of that is $100,000. Unless my math is terrible, which it could well be.
Depends on when you went to school, I guess.
Yeah, the new math. So you're being asked to pay $100,000 for necessary repairs. These things have to be done. This isn't cosmetic. This is to repair vital things that got damaged or destroyed. $100,000 is a lot of money for any community to come up with, particularly a small one. And so that is something that I know Cache Creek Council have been lobbying the government to look at that formula for small communities especially, because it can be very, very costly after the event to come up with this 20% of funding depending on what you've had to do.
Right. Yeah, so those are just a couple of things that sort of stood out for me at the Cache Creek Council meeting. But let's move on from that. Do you have any particular story that you wanted to talk about today?
Particular stories from the area, from Cache Creek and Ashcroft.
So what we've decided to do is we are going to really start talking about Spence's Bridge to Clinton.
Oh, okay,
So
Spence's
if you
Bridge.
have
Oh, big
anything that you
big
would,
area. Let's see. Oh, well, Ashcroft Legacy Park Campground.
yeah,
Have you talked about that?
we mentioned it the other day,
Oh.
but I was hoping that you would go into more detail with me.
Well, I can't go into a lot more detail, but
Was that a grant?
that was a grant.
Oh,
That was a grant.
it's a G word.
And we were very excited to get this. Some people don't know that we have a camp. The village of Ashcroft owns a campground.
Yep.
And some people don't know where that is. And if you are heading towards the River Inn, instead of turning left to go into the River Inn parking lot, keep on going. And that is where our Legacy Park campground is. And it's open from May 1st through October. The date can be a bit flexible. And we have 30 sites in there right now. And we have wanted to upgrade them. Now, full disclosure, I have never owned an RV. I probably never will. But the sites there, they don't have sewage. So there is a sandy dump at the site. But what we found is that a lot of people come and they'll stay there for 2 or 3 weeks. Excuse me, they'll use it as a base while they're touring the area. They come here because they're buying a home in the area and they want to use that as a base while they go and explore.
Sure.
And so, having to pick up, move to a sandy dump, do your thing, and then go back to your spot is a little bit of a nuisance. So we've got a grant, $124,000, I think $191, to put sewer service at every site. Right now, a handful of sites have 30 amp electrical service. We're going to have 30 amp electrical service at every site. Plus, we're going to be able to put some tenting sites in there.
Oh, fun.
Because right now, all the sites are designed for RVs. We charge more for RVs than we do for tents. And when people come in and just want to pitch a tent for the night or 2 nights, we have to put them in an RV spot, which means we could turn an RV away. And it is often full. There were a lot of nights last year it was completely booked. Oh, dear. So we're going to be able to build some dedicated tenting spots. And if all goes according to plan, we're going to have all this done by May 1st
Okay.
when it opens for the season.
Now, was this grant a 100% grant or was it an 80% grant?
This was a 100% grant.
Okay. Good to know.
Now, it's always understood with grants, too. This is the other thing. I mean, you do your best to cost out the project, but because it takes so long for grants to be approved, and I mean, things change. I mean, the price of lumber has just shot up. So if your grant involved anything made out of wood, the cost has just gone up of the project. But your grant application is still for the same amount that it was when you costed it out.
Right.
So it's acknowledged that if we run into more costs, then we have to pay that.
Right.
So the $124,000 we got was based on calculations about what we wanted to do, and we would have priced it out. This is how much we think it's going to cost. Here we go.
Okay, so when grants come up, sorry, this question sort of popped in my head. So when grants come up, I'm assuming that it would be, okay, there's a thing for a water treatment plant. Do you then start the process to say, okay, we want a water treatment plant, let's start looking at it? Or do you guys already have like a bunch of files where you have projects that you want to do, and you're kind of waiting for a grant to show up to do it?
That's been my experience, that you hear a lot of talking government about shovel-ready projects, which means it's pretty much good to go. You've costed it out, you've figured out exactly all the ins and outs. So what you try to do, I think, or should try to do, is figure out what you want to do. Because a lot of grants, I mentioned they're oversubscribed. You get way more people applying for the grants than you have money to hand out. And so I think the people who are considering the grant applications, they look at grant applications and say, okay, is this person applying for the grant because their community really needs to have it and they've figured out their community needs to have it, or are they just, it would be nice.
Right.
It would be nice if. So, and because, as I said, a lot of the grants that come out when they're announced that this grant funding opportunity is available, the parameters can be very narrow. So you have to make sure your project fits in a very narrow set of guidelines. So if you have a project that's all ready to go, when a new grant's announced, you can take a look at it and go, no, that doesn't fit.
Right.
Or yes, it does. So let's get on her.
Okay. Okay, so I got a story here. So this is from Jackie Taggart, and she says, I am so pleased that I've been involved in the development of a tourism master plan for the Fraser Canyon from Yale to Lytton. The plan is very near complete, and we are now hosting open houses to share the plan with community members and to get your input. If you live, work, or play in the Fraser Canyon, please join us for one of the open houses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel snubbed that it stops in Lytton?
Well, no,
I'm just kidding. That's probably bad.
no, because well, I mean, it's geography, and you can't argue with geography. That's where the Fraser River, So, I mean, I think it's funny. It's one of those things when people say driving the Fraser Canyon, or I'm taking the Fraser Canyon to get from here to the coast.
I call it the canyon.
It's the canyon, and to me, in my head, I've been driving it since 1971 in one way or another. I wasn't driving it personally in 1971. I add quickly. But no, to me, the canyon is sort of Hope to Cache Creek.
Right.
But technically, of course, the Fraser Canyon is from Lytton south, and that is that. I mean, and I love the scenery from Lytton north. I love how when you're driving through Lytton, and you get to past the second turnoff if you're heading north, the second turnoff to go into town, the landscape just changes, and there's no kind of gradual change from the west coast to the dry interior. It's like, boom, someone took a ruler and just laid it on the landscape and said, all right, everything on this side is kind of sub-rainforest and everything on this side is desert. It is that dramatic. So I love Lytton North, but the really dramatic portion is the Fraser Canyon route. I mean, that is, you know, the oohs and ahs from tourists, and I'm sure everyone who lives here and has driven that route in summertime when you're stuck behind the RVs that are doing, you know, 60 kilometers an hour as everyone's rubbernecking at the scenery. It's, yeah.
Are you hoping or privy to any information that there might be like a phase 2 where it goes to Cache Creek or Clinton, this sort of revitalization of that drive?
I haven't heard. I would hope that would be a natural extension. I mean, a lot of the talk that's been about this first phase is signposting, so letting people know what's along the canyon, what there is to stop at and do and see. There's been talk about better lighting and better amenities. Yep. I've talked to several women, especially, who, if they're driving that route at night, there are very few places to stop because, you know, you think once you know, Hope River closes at 7, the store there, and then you've got Yale, nothing open there. You've got Boston Bar, you've got Lytton, you've got Spence's Bridge. Once you get past a certain time of night, nothing's open. Yep. And as a woman, especially if you're on your own, if something happens or you need to pull off to the side of the road and make a phone call, you know, you want to do it somewhere where there's lighting, where, you know, it's safe. And there's a real lack of those places along the canyon. I mean, there are a few pullouts, places you can stop and you know, take your pictures. But just having a few more of those, making sure they're in good condition, you know, not potholes and just gravel, maybe throw a bit of paving down on them or something. Right. And more washroom facilities, which is something where we fall down really badly in BC with public washroom facilities. And I know with COVID it's really difficult. A lot of washroom facilities didn't open last year because of the difficulties of keeping them clean and sanitized with COVID. But no, I mean, you're driving along the canyon, and I mean, I would tell a very humorous story, but if my son ever heard me telling this publicly, he would probably disown me, so I won't.
Turn off your computer.
No, it just highlighted the lack of places, and it's a story I'm sure any parent of a youngish child would relate to in terms of, I've got to go right now. Because when a 3-year-old says that, they mean right now. They don't mean 20 minutes until we get to such and such a place. So we really do need to do better, I think, in terms of washrooms. And it's sad because I've seen such a decline in the canyon. As I said, my first trip up here was in '71. And just to watch after the Coquihalla was built and to see the decline in the facilities along the canyon route has, you know, no one intended for the Coquihalla to do what it did to the Fraser Canyon, although I'm sure at the time, 1980, early 80s, when it was being contemplated, someone must have thought, wow, you know, if you make a way for people to drive from Vancouver to Kamloops and then the shoe swap by taking a different route that's going to shave an hour or more off their time, do you think it's going to have any effect on the old route that's longer and everything? You know, someone must have had that conversation, I hope.
I think when that really took over was when the Coquihalla dropped the $10 toll.
Well, it was before that. It was before that because people wanted to save that hour. I mean, up until 1986, if you wanted to get from the Lower Mainland to Kamloops and then east, you had to come up the canyon to Cache Creek and either continue north or hang a right. When my mom was coming up here with her family in the late 50s, it was a 2-day trip from Vancouver to the shoe swap where they used to go and stay in the summer.
Right.
And they would overnight at Bighorn, just south of Spence's Bridge, because there was an auto court there with little cabins.
Oh yeah.
And so that was halfway. So today to think, wow, halfway, you know, like that was a full day trip to Spence's Bridge. Yes, it was. And of course, the building of the Trans-Canada cut down on the travel time a lot. But then I think the Coquihalla was the final nail in the coffin for a lot of places along the canyon route. And you know, it really is, as MLA Taggart says, it really is almost like a forgotten gem.
We have a comment from Steve. He says, Trans-Canada Canyon Quarter number 1, we need continuity, meaning when this project stops at Lytton, the Trans-Canada keeps going north. This should be a seamless transition right up to 100 Mile.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that's something that piques your interest, be sure to email your MLA, Jackie Taggart, and she's the one, as far as I can tell, sort of spearheading this project. I think it would be cool to have it come, if not 100 Mile, at least to Clinton as a, but 100 Mile would be even better. So, but
yeah, it's a fantastic corridor. There's certainly lots and lots to see along it, lots to do. Whether you're into history or geography or the scenic panoramas or sports or outdoor activities or First Nations history, you know, it's got it all. Right. And it is a fantastic route from that whole Gold Rush Trail, right from Hope, you know, and then Yale and on up, all the way up to, well, to Barkerville, really.
Well, sometimes I want to talk to you about this on a different day. I do have an appointment I have to go to just after 4. So we'll save medical trips for a different time.
Oh, good.
However, there are several times where I have to drive the canyon, and I go down in the morning, do my appointment, and come home. So I'm very lucky that it is such a nice drive.
Yep.
And not. I feel like the Coquihalla is a slog. It just feels very sparse.
It's a super high. It was designed to do a certain thing and to do it with all the modern engineering techniques.
I don't want to call it the highway through hell.
The number full disclosure here, I have driven the Coquihalla from Vancouver to Kamloops one way once in my life. That's it. Yeah. I always take the canyon.
I've driven it twice. One time I got squished by a semi-truck. And one time recently my car died just outside of Hope.
I'm sure that does not color your opinion of it at all.
No.
No, nothing to do with that.
So the other thing that's going on here is, just before we get out of here, is Barbara is going to join me once a month moving forward. So thank you, Barbara, for taking on that responsibility of coming and helping us make our show better. And if you were sitting at home and you would like to come in and join me sporadically or as much as you want, please leave a comment, send us an email. Email me at honjournalist@ashcrafthub.com and we'll set that up. I'll invite pretty much anybody on the show if you have something to say, and we'll go from there. So Barbara's going to be back next month, and good luck on your gallbladder surgery.
Thank you.
And to everybody at home watching, thank you for watching. I'm sorry that I got to cut this short because I do have I'm meeting some people about talking about the Cache Creek pool today. So unfortunately, I got to go, but we'll go again, we'll see you all on Monday before the Ashcroft Council meeting, where we're going to talk about what the council is going to talk about and hold them to account in Ashcroft.
All right.
So, right on. Everybody have a good day. We'll see you later. And thank you for talking and chatting with us, Steve. I appreciate that.